Well, it's a great pleasure to tell you more about the unique case study that Fit for Food 2030 aspires to be. The project is a support action to the European Commission to implement Food 2030. And Food 2030 has been established a couple of years ago and is a policy framework of the European Commission on food and nutrition security in Europe and how that research and innovation can contribute to achieving that goal of food and nutrition security. So in that sense, this project really tries to bring the message of the Food 2030 policy framework further, but more importantly, it tries to operationalize it. I will tell a bit more about the philosophy of that is behind this thinking on research and innovation as a catalyst for food system transformation. Well, first of all, we know that there are, and other speakers have already talked about this as well, there are quite a number of problems in our society in relation, first of all, to food production, where we are increasingly seeing climate change having an impact on, for example, drought or rainfall. We see production methods such as extensive use of pesticides, but also animal production where use of antibiotics increases resistancy levels to antibiotics, and the frequent transportation of animals has strong animal welfare implications, but also big carbon footprint. But this is on the production side. On the other end, if we move towards the consumption side, we see on the one hand that still a lot of people don't get enough nutrition and are severely malnourished in the sense of stunting and wasting. On the other hand, in the more higher income countries, we see an excessive amount of food being consumed, which leads to overweight, weight and obesity in many of us. And nowadays we are talking a lot about the obesogene epidemic. So there are many of these problems, both with respect to environment, carbon footprint, pesticide use, biodiversity loss, and on the other hand, health implications with respect to non-communicable diseases, basically, because obesity is a very strong driver for many NCDs. And we see that the food systems that we have nowadays don't seem to be able to curb these problems. So this is not a future that we would like to see for us. We want to have a healthy, sustainable planet. So the big challenge that we have before us in the coming 20, 30 years is basically how can we curb the route that we are taking now with our food and food systems towards this vision of a more equitable, healthy, sustainable planet. Now, what is the route that we can take to that vision? In Food 2030, the idea is that research and innovation has a strong role to play to achieve that goal. And that, so the focus is on, with research and innovation, to create a sense of urgency. We can better understand the problem. We can also identify, develop, and test breakthrough innovations. And with innovations, we don't mean just technical ones, but also very much social innovation. We can organize things differently. And not last but not least, we can understand the dynamics better, because a food system is a complex system, as we have heard before. So to understand facilitators and barriers in that system is important. There are synergies, but there are also trade-offs. So Food 2030 tries to achieve this better future, a future-proof food system through research and innovation. So what do we need to do? It turns out, however, that we see that our research and innovation system is not so well equipped to achieve, to contribute to future-proof European food systems. There are barriers. And some of the barriers are, first of all, the fragmented research and innovation landscape, both within science, where we have silos between the disciplines, and we see it in the societal sectors, where we see a clear divide, for example, between agriculture and health and nutrition and the retail. So these silos actually, as the word silo already says, don't communicate with one another. So how can then such a fragmented research and innovation landscape actually contribute to such a holistic view as a food system? Secondly, there is a very much importance of linking up with citizens and consumers, civil society organizations, as important players within this transition process, this transformation process. So it's not only about production, it's also very much about consumption. And if we want to change diets, if we want to change what people do, if we want to change behaviors, then we do need to have the involvement of citizens as well. However, in research and innovation today, we see very low involvement of these types of actors. Actually, when we say before with the fragmentation and with the involvement of citizens, we're actually talking about inter- and transdisciplinary research. And the interesting thing is that if we look at academia, research institutes, to what extent these support inter- and transdisciplinary research, we find that that support is pretty low. And this is also true for the investments. So we see on the one hand private sector with investments, and of course they invest in food, in the food sector, but they don't invest in future-proofing European food systems. So most of the investments go to traditional, conventional research and not to the type of research we need nowadays. Unfortunately, public funding is also not very conducive to that. What we see is that they usually have open calls and not so much thematic. So food as a topic to focus on is not negligent, but is much less receiving emphasis than some more topics like biotechnology or specific agricultural topics. All in all, we need much more knowledge and awareness for the importance of the type of research and innovation that is needed for food and nutrition security. So there's quite a bit to do, and that's exactly where Fit for Food comes in. And we want, first of all, to stimulate what we call system thinking in research and innovation. And system thinking is a radically different way of looking at how the world works. It works with exactly the fact that everything is interconnected. A system is a complex whole, and we need to therefore synthesize the different parts to a unified view. That actually also means that we need to anticipate the future and design and implement our innovations accordingly. So it's a different way of setting up our research. And nowadays, the conventional way of doing research is either the linear view, where we have clear ideas about cause, simplified ideas about cause and effect, or at most a linear view. However, a more systemic view requires that we do what we call complex system thinking, and it's thinking in networks where different parts interact with each other back and forth, not just in a unilinear way. The second important thing that we want to do with Fit for Food is promote stakeholder engagement. So if we're looking at the challenges and the vision of where we want to go, and when we have in the middle this research and innovation, that's a compartmentalization in itself as well. Huh? So on one end, we have these problems with their stakeholders. On the other hand, we have the vision on where we want to go to. It's again society that needs to implement the results of research and innovation. Actually, the system thinking, when you really think it through, let's say, it means that research and innovation should become part of that problem context and interact with the stakeholders to understand the problem fully, as well as to understand what works and what doesn't work in real life situations. So that means that all the actors that are acting in one of the compartments need to work together in research and innovation. That means that we need to create spaces where these stakeholders meet. And actually, that is what responsible research and innovation tries to do. Research and innovation is a term that has been coined by the European Commission already in the early 10s, so it was around 2011, where research is seen as inclusive for a diversity of stakeholders, where we have anticipation and reflection on the future together with those stakeholders, being transparent in communication and interaction patterns, and have a research community that is really responsive to those inputs of stakeholders and takes action accordingly. Now, how does Fit4Food try to do that? First of all, it has a wide variety of stakeholders, from research, policy, business, and civil society involved. And it brings it together in a platform at different levels. At EU level, you have various experts from science and from stakeholders together. We have policy labs at country level, at national level, and we have city labs at the level of cities. And they implement a systems approach and stakeholder participation. We provide training and support, insights and trends and policy showcases and breakthroughs as content is brought in, with methods and tools to achieve that we strengthen policy coherence and alignment. And that's more about the funding, so that we see more programs funding food as a specific topic and promote research and innovation, responsible research and innovation, and a systems approach. We build competencies on food systems R&I and RRI. Because what you see, because of the people have been working much more in the conventional way, they have missed out on many of the knowledge and skills needed to do it. So this will build the competencies. That's what the city labs specifically do, while the policy coherence is for the policy labs at national level. And together, all the different activities are meant to raise awareness. So on the one hand, we have the policy labs and the city labs working together, networking with all the different stakeholders and making things happen on the ground in a flexible, continuously adapting way. We follow that closely. So we provide training, but also really the support while they are working. The city and the food labs are coordinated by the science centers and science shops that build the city networks through stakeholder workshops, and they develop educational models to improve the competencies. But the educational models are built on the competencies as identified by the different stakeholders in the stakeholder workshops on what is really needed in the future to bring this food system transformation further. The policy labs have the strong involvement of ministries, so they're very linked to the high-level policy making in the countries, where a dialogue is created with all sorts of different stakeholders to understand where are we now, where do we want to go, and how do we get there with respect to specific policies, methodologies, and research and innovation programs. To conclude, What Fit for Food does is very much argue that we need to change our research and innovation system so that we can serve better as a catalyst for food system transformation, that we really need system thinking and active stakeholder involvement as prerequisites for research and innovation to contribute to the food system transformation, and that we need to raise awareness, build networks, and improve competencies to support that. And in the end, we established this network, this Food 2030 network, with 25 labs at city and regional national level to create these networks that can sustain after the project terminates. Thank you very much, and here are the partners in the project, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.